Shalom. My name is Rabbi Josh Caruso. I'm of Congregation Mishkan Or. It is my honor to be here today as we remember our friend Bob Jackson. I'd like to just take this moment and invite everyone to make sure that the devices that you have on you, most likely a phone, is put on silent or just turned off altogether, so we could just be in this moment and remember Bob without interruption. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey, from childhood to maturity, and youth to age, from innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, and from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. Life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch, a fearful thing to love, hope, dream to be and oh to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. Bob, your life has lived in us. Your laugh lifted us. Your word was gift to us. To remember this brings a painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched. In this sacred time and place, we're going to have a few individuals close to Bob who are going to share some memories, some thoughts. We're going to first invite Bob's dear friend, Jared Florian, to share some words, followed by his grandchildren, Alyssa and Alex, and then we'll invite Doug and Karen, his kids, to come up and share some words as well. Jared.
It's really a great honor to be here. Over 50 years ago, I walked into Bob's beautiful and somewhat intimidating offices as a 20-something entrepreneurial wannabe. Father of a good friend of mine had said, I was really a horrible tennis player and I really needed to stop wasting my time trying to travel around the world playing internationally. And he said, you better do something a little bit more productive. And this individual had known Bob Jackson as someone who would invest in young people's lives and perhaps mentor them and give them a chance. And so within a week or so, I was knocking on Bob's office. Really didn't get to Bob's office. You had to go through Jan, or you had to go through several receptionists to get to Bob. But Bob welcomed me. I was intimidated. The view from the office was spectacular, the art collections. But Bob spent time, maybe he was thinking he was speaking with a knucklehead, but he never shared that. What he shared was a friendship, mentorship, and at the end of the day, love. Just a few days after meeting Bob, he gave me the keys to his office, and he said, you need to go work on a business plan. And keys to his office, it was magnificent, it involved trust, it was an enormous statement. And really for the next 50 years, that's how Bob invested in my life. And he was a mentor, and he was a friend, an inspiration, and someone I loved. I read Bob's obituary yesterday, and I was surprised and shocked at the number of things that he was involved in. And I was trying to understand, why didn't I know all these things? And I think at the end of the day, I realized that Bob was always focused on other people. He was never self-centered. It was always about, what were you doing? And when I visited him in the ICU unit several times, he would open his eyes, there would be a glimmer of a twinkle, and he'd always say, how are you doing? How's work? How's the family? And he could barely eat or get words out, but there was a love and a care, even in those very dark times in the hospital. Bob was a great man. Many of you know his accomplishments, his successes throughout his long life. But more important than those successes in business, his legal practice, his collecting, was Bob, a man that I knew of great character. He lived a life of integrity, honesty, loyalty, fidelity, and love. Parkinson's struck Bob several years ago, actually many years ago. The disease gradually and relentlessly progressed inch by inch, foot by foot, and even mile by mile throughout his life, taking away from him many of the things he enjoyed. Things like tennis or playing the piano or cultivating his roses or swimming. And towards the end, even walking was very difficult. Eating became almost impossible. But the one thing I never heard from Bob over all of this suffering was, why me? There was never complaining. There was never a moment when I heard him say, I don't want to live anymore, because I think he always wanted to live, especially because of Donna and his children and his grandchildren. Despite Bob's apparent physical decline, which was horrible to see, Bob lived a life of great dignity, nobility, and love. I loved Bob, and I will grieve over him for the rest of my life.
It was difficult for me to capture in words all the ways my grandfather influenced my life. So I did what any smart sibling would do. I consulted my older sister, Katie, who very much wishes she could be here today. On the phone yesterday, we took a trip through time to relive some of our most memorable moments with our grandfather. We both instantly thought of the countless times he recanted the amazingly adventurous life he shared with our grandmother. Through those conversations, Katie and I received so much wisdom that helped shape the way we are today. Personally, I would like to blame him for perhaps my biggest addiction, chess. Some of my earliest memories in Cleveland involve sitting around a chessboard with my grandfather. He was a patient teacher with me as I struggled with and initially rejected the game that I would come to love. However, learning that game from a young age taught me so much about mental strength, creativity, how to lose gracefully, and how to think ahead. Now looking back, I am grateful. He also shared with me his love of the cosmos. I remember receiving all types of lessons from him on the way our universe operated and how much was yet to be discovered and explained. In high school, I took a summer course on astrophysics and cosmology. After that, I couldn't take a trip to Cleveland without leaving with a new stack of books he had handpicked for me from his vast collection. Admittedly, I'm still working through many of those. For Katie, the bonds were different in many ways, but equal in strength. Their shared love of reading and pursuit of knowledge has now led Katie to follow in his footsteps at law school. Additionally, my sister has graciously adopted our grandfather's innate ability to spill food on himself at every meal, a tradition I am thankful will not be lost. As I reflected over the past few days, I realized that while Parkinson's may have put a limit on Papa's body, it never constrained his mind. Even in the more recent years when speaking became more difficult, he always found a way to connect with Katie and I on things we love most. It reminded me that some of our fondest experiences with him weren't wild escapades, but genuine conversations and teachable moments. Thank you, Papa, for showing us the world through your eyes. We miss you each day and every day.
So people will likely comment on my grandfather's driving skills or lack thereof. They'll bring up his love of books and reading, learning and exploration. It would likely be easier to name the countries my grandparents haven't been to than to name the ones that they have visited. It seems like if there is anywhere in the world that they wanted to go, they would go. There are many things I'd like to say about my grandfather. In the essence of time, I will try to make things concise as he would prefer. I had a different kind of grandfather than others. We did the normal grandparent-grandchild adventures together, watching Frank Sinatra movies, listening to classical music, testing out new sugar-free candies that I found at the store, eating breakfast at the original Pancake House, or helping replace the tires on his Jaguars. On the other hand, I was often helping with his mobility, moving him when he needed it, adjusting his extremities, running to grab whatever he asked for. He trusted me, and when we were together, we were able to take care of whatever he needed done. This means I got to see a more vulnerable side of my grandfather than most people. I'm grateful for those moments. In those moments, I was able to learn an important lesson from him. I can't read, sorry. You only get out of life what you put into it. When Parkinson's started to degrade his ability to take care of himself, he adjusted. He fought. He fought to stay out of the wheelchair. He walked every day. He kept going, and despite many roadblocks pushing against him, he stayed as healthy as he could be, as much as his authentic self as he could be. He was a fighter through and through. He put in effort to stay well. He made it possible to do what he wanted to do, even in his last few weeks, because he knew he'd have to put in the effort to make it possible. He worked hard in career, body, and mind, and I will forever remember the ferocity with which he fought his disease and the will it took to keep going. I will live my life like Bob, always pushing, giving 210%. Thank you, Papa, for teaching me to be strong.
Well, that's hard to follow. My brother and I, and on my mom's behalf, want to publicly thank those who cared for my dad. First, Sue, who many of you know and love. Sue, unfortunately, and her wife Gwen are out of town, but I believe they're watching on the live stream, wherever that is, the cameras. Sue and Gwen started as friends of Bob and myself. I suggested to Sue that she become his personal Uber driver, and she thought that was a great idea. He thought it was a great idea, and that turned into a 5-year job for Sue, and it involved more and more actual physical care. She became part of the family. She loves my dad like a second father. And miraculously, after 5 years of caring for him, she is still our friend. And she was totally heartbroken to learn of his passing as well as to not be here. After Sue, we were very lucky to, we had a number of people, but then we were lucky to rest on a group consisting of Annette, who is here. I saw her, Jackie, Paris, Soraya, and Taz, who, oh, they're waving. They're back there. Hi. They were really equally wonderful. Each had their own relationship and special way with him and arguments. And that was good, too, because they became family as well. They put up with him as his physical abilities diminished, and he felt unable to do more and more. And their efforts, their care, their love, and kindness is very, very deeply appreciated by all of us, and by my family and Doug's family as well. And I will miss seeing them. I know my mom is nodding her head as well. So we just wanted to publicly let everyone know, so thank you all. Okay, I guess I'm first. I guess the youngest one goes first.
Sure.
It's a little running joke my brother and I have always had. Many of you know his personal and professional accomplishments, but I really wanted to share some stories and highlight some things that people may not know about him. He loved watching old movies, sci-fi movies, foreign films with subtitles, and obscure movies, really most any movie. The year I was born was a leap year, and my mother and her friend went into the hospital, and my mother said to my father, "I don't want our child born on leap year day." Her friend gave birth. They sent my father home saying I wasn't going to be born until March 1st. My mom went into labor. They called the house, and they couldn't find him. And so I was born shortly after midnight on March 1st, not on leap year day. And where was my father but at the movies? And he has never forgotten, nor forgotten to tell me that the name of the movie is called The Good Soldier Schweith. I have not seen it. Doug told me that it was remade recently.
Yeah, 1958 movie about the Czech Rebellion.
So this is really great to know that, right? I will obviously have to find time in the next few years to make sure that I see that. The other story I want to share is, Jared mentioned roses. My mother likes to say that my dad was soft but thorny, which is the rose. He loved roses. He was a rose aficionado. Every spring we had to go buy a new fancy rose to put in his rose garden. He would come home from work and meticulously tend to those roses. The rose garden got bigger and bigger. My mother kept saying, "You're taking more of my garden." They had roses here and other flowers there, and that was totally a passion of his. And one year for his birthday, they have a rose garden in Shaker Heights by the middle school, I believe, and I bought a rose bush that was named after him. And he was very thrilled to have that. Now I'm going to share another story that I want you to know ahead of time. I got permission and clearance from my mother to share, just so you know as the story goes on. On one of our visits to Chico Hot Springs, and for those who don't know, it was a ranch and hotel that my parents co-owned in Montana, I was given money by my father to take Doug to the game room. He told us to be gone for an hour so he could fool around with my mom. Yes.
I was just happy to play the games. So.
Right. Doug was totally clueless, and it took him many years to figure out what that code meant, because it occurred a number of times, other times. I, of course, asked for more money if they wanted us to be gone that long. And Doug, just as he said, just wanted to really play. So that's one story. She was okay that everyone got that story. The next story short story I want to talk about is his books and book collecting, which at a point in time I actually started a collection of my own. But I think it was in the obituary about his William Burroughs collection. It weighed a ton. He traveled to Europe to buy it. It arrived at our home in very large crates that were then moved to the basement, much to my mother's disappointment. She didn't want him there. It was taking up space. And it started to rain one day, and it started to flood. My father wasn't home, and I said, Mom, we got to move these. And my mom said, I'm not moving them. I told your father not to put them there. And so I started to go down. I don't know where you were, but I started to go down,
Game room.
You were in the game room? Okay. I went down and waded through a very high water to remove every piece, and then my mom eventually started helping as well. Along those lines, William Burroughs also was a guest at our home a number of times, and one of those times he decided to borrow, without my father's knowledge, a manuscript that he had written and it had never been published. So to him, he saw that as a way to make money for himself. So eventually, after they left, he called my dad and said, by the way, we took this. We probably shouldn't have. And you know, I really shouldn't have done it. I want to publish it, and I want to publish it my way. In exchange for what I've done that is wrong, I'm going to name a character in the book after you. And my dad said, no, I do not want that. And so he instead decided to dedicate the book to him, and we thought that was very special, and so that was nice. My dad fought very hard and long to live. There were many times when I thought he had no quality of life. I couldn't imagine myself being like that. But the truth is, he didn't want to go because no matter how his quality of life diminished, what was most important to him was to be there for my mother and his deep love for her. And he did not want to leave her. My brother shared how my dad was very upset on a trip the three of them took, and how I said I was surprised. I had not heard that he was upset, and Doug said he was upset more for my mom than himself. And that's really kind of how it, to me, sums up their relationship. Exactly 1 week before he died, he said my name to acknowledge he knew I was there. And when I left, I said, I love you, Dad. And he responded with, I love you. That is the last time I heard him speak. So I love you, Dad.
My dad had a signature question for my sister and me on our birthdays. Every year he'd ask us, what profound thoughts do you have on this day? And he would force us, and he said those exact words, and he would force us to reflect on the year past, the year ahead, and our lives in general. And it became a bit of a running joke in our family. Any profound thoughts? We would ask each other. I'm not sure these are profound thoughts, but I will try to honor him today, as I do every day. With a few thoughts about him. It's hard to capture the spirit of a person you've grown up with, who you are close to, and you are so close to that you lose objective perspective. I knew him as a cerebral, tough, sharp, and sharp-edged, intellectually curious, and witty. He wasn't an easy person, and as the rabbi pointed out to us when we were sitting with him yesterday, he did not suffer fools gladly. He constantly challenged people, much like he challenged himself, trying to find intellectually stimulating counterparts with whom he could verbally parry. He enjoyed that game. So we knew him from our eyes, but in a moment like this, people share their thoughts about him from their perspective. The impact he had on their lives as mentor, friend, companion, lawyer. We got a note the other day from one of his longtime partners, who I believe is here today, that made us appreciate that impact, and I'll read it here, quoting. Some folks I've met over the years are intellectual. Some are cultural. Some are down to earth. Some are inspiring. Some are passionate. Some have street smarts. Some have book smarts. Some are considerate. Some are generous. Some are adventurous. Some are amiable. Some are witty. Margin. Some are accomplished. Some are talented. And some are ingenious. Bob was all of those adjectives rolled up into one. My dad demonstrated two key characteristics that I think defined him. That intellectual curiosity which he displayed in every facet of his life, and his enduring love for my mom, Donna. I can try to capture the depths of their relationship in a couple of stories. The first one came 22 years ago. My wife Lynn and I had been married nearly 6 years. And this has been mentioned, but my dad was quite dependent on his secretary, Janet, who many of you knew. And Karen and I were quite accustomed to getting letters and cards signed, Love Dad, in Janet's handwriting and signature purple pen. Yeah. But I actually received an actual handwritten letter from him in 2002 that caught me off guard, and I actually saved it. I'm going to share it with you now, if you don't mind. It's not too long, because she was not.
Janet did print that envelope.
She did. I have the letter here. It's dated January 25 of 02. Douglas, children frequently, for most, if not all of their lives, exist with the mysteriousness of their parents' relationship with each other. Some don't want to know. Others are too shy to ask. And, of course, some don't think about it. I want to share with you, at least in this instance, a note or poem your mother wrote to me on my 65th birthday. It's a hard act to follow for hers. Her birthday is always shortly after his. P.S. You can show it to Lynn, too. And he shared a love poem that my mom had written him, which she did every year on their anniversary and for other occasions, which we're not going to read this one, but we're going to read another one. The second story I wanted to share was actually conveyed to me by a friend of Lynn's and mine in Chicago. Nancy was a travel agent and was working with my folks planning one last trip they had hoped to take before my dad couldn't travel anymore. After they spoke, she sent me the following message. I spoke to my new friend Bob today. I asked him, what would he say are his favorite places in the world in terms of peaceful, beautiful, and serene, where he would like to have quality time with his family? He replied, well, Donna would say Treasure Cay, our family home in the Bahamas. And Nancy replied, and where is your favorite place, Bob, that's beautiful and serene? And he replied, anywhere with my wife, Donna. And she said, I just wanted you to know that. My parents are well known for their love of adventurous travel, as I think everybody here knows. And as Karen pointed out, on many occasions, he promised my mom at their before they got married that he would show her the world, and he did. They spent a lifetime together traveling to places many had never even heard of. Several years ago, he started a project to write a memoir about those travels and their adventures together. And he tried to combine it as a way to reflect on his advancing Parkinson's, as a way to attempt to make a sense about that encroaching and debilitating disease. I thought I'd share the first 2 paragraphs of that still unpublished work because I thought they really capture him well. And I'm now quoting. The word recherche is used in English to refer to something that is notable for being obscure, refined, and out of the ordinary. You are not likely to encounter the recherche at your local shopping plaza, office building, or fitness center. You are more likely to have to search for it long and hard. That might mean traveling to far locales, studying arcane subjects, poking into dusty corners, and coming face to face with exotic, to you, peoples. I here freely admit that I've spent much of my life in search of the odd, the obscure, and the out of the way. This search has launched me on overlapping quests for art, books, music, places, and people that are difficult of access and somewhat outside the quotidian. Often, these quests have taken me overseas. I visited places whose names are synonymous with the distant and the strange. Timbuktu, Samarkand, New Guinea, Tierra del Fuego, and Outer Mongolia. Most of my travels have been accomplished in partnership with the indefatigable Donna, my wife of 65 years. More recently, we've traveled with an unwelcome guest, Parkinson's disease. What defined him? Lawyer, book collector, exotic traveler, classical music aficionado, student of quantum physics and cosmology, opera buff, father, husband, friend. He was all those things and more. He was a man of parts who led a life well lived. We loved him, and he will be greatly missed. And we just wanted to share, as I mentioned, my mom was so much more creative and such a better writer than he ever could be.
Very true.
She was the editor that made all of his writings better. And we just found one of the, it's not quite a poem, she wants to make sure she's a poet too. This was just something she wrote to him on their 62nd anniversary 3 years ago, and we thought we'd read it to you. Bob, happy 62nd anniversary. A few reasons I love you. Because.
And I should say, because is one of her favorite words. You are my best friend.
You are so intelligent.
You are witty.
You are mine.
You are a thinker.
You are a leader.
You are an adventurer.
You are tough on the outside.
You are soft on the inside.
You are generous.
You like challenges.
You are romantic.
You are my support.
You are a great companion.
You are sentimental.
You have perseverance.
You make me happy.
You are loving.
You showed me the world. Donna.
Thank you.
When Great Trees Fall by Maya Angelou. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder, lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly, see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory suddenly sharpened examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. In the great compendium of rabbinic wisdom, Pirkei Avot, the great sage Hillel wrote, perhaps the most oft-quoted aphorism of that volume, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when?" I share Hillel's words not because Bob Jackson was a religious or observant man. He was proud to be a Jew, but generally regarded religion as the opiate of the masses, as Karl Marx said. Regardless, is it not a coincidence that Bob's Hebrew name was Hillel? As such, I'd like to think that Bob would regard his namesake's most well-known maxim as a proper framing for the contours of his life. The first part, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? This part of the maxim is a bold statement about Judaism's pragmatism. Self-realization is a cornerstone of living a life of value and ultimately contributes to the greater good. Bob, a self-made man, spent his life striving to grow his knowledge and his learnings of the world. His intellectual pursuits knew no bounds. He studied cosmology, quantum physics, black holes, piano, all as an adult, hiring tutors to satiate his quest for knowledge. His core interests centered on rare book collections, African and Asian art, world travel, and his written retelling of an ill-fated trip with Donna and Doug to Pakistan. Intense mudslides created a good deal of worry. He recalled why he was so drawn to travel. He wrote, "As a boy, I often looked at sepia or black and white pictures in old travel books. Add vibrant shades of green and imagine a place and time 2,000 years ago. The reason for this trip, one of many to the reason, he described as follows. What was our fascination for this area? Perhaps the writings of Marco Polo or Kipling, the movies of Korda and Hilton's Lost Horizon, or simply stories told or read in childhood of faraway and mystical places where a robust imagination could speculate on the then unrealistic possibility of one day visiting those places." On less eventful travels, Donna and Bob collected Southeast Asian manuscripts, oceanic and African tribal arts. Notable institutions like the Western Reserve Historical Society exhibited the art they procured from their world travels. A walk through their home transports the visitor, striking art, large and small, detailing their trips and interest in cultures that are foreign to many of us. Reading and collecting books provided great joy to Bob, who had a fascination for rare books and even the art of collecting. Bob made presentations to the Western Reserve Historical Society on topics like the collector's dilemma or the magic of collecting. Bob's interests, ever growing and expanding, knowing no limits, found him presenting the history of the book. One such presentation chronicled Victorian serials, paper booklets found on newsstands, nightstands, and railway carriages in the 1800s. In the introduction to this presentation, Bob wrote, "In the 19th century, these objects carried affordable entertainment to a growing middle class, a weekly or monthly diversion that, when heaped into single volumes and subjected to the near geologic pressure of time and affection, were transmuted into a kind of cultural marble and erected as pillars of Western civilization. where until recently they stood stern, lofty, and immovable. Speaking personally, he added, I have had the pleasure of collecting some of those Victorian serials that remain, and the opportunity to read them, live with them, and consider the world they came from. It is telling that I've shared this much about Bob's life, all the avocations, without a mention of his vocation, the law. Bob brought his incisive mind, sharpened by the study of philosophy in undergrad and earning his J.D. at Case Law, to a law firm that would ultimately be known as Corman, Jackson, and Krantz. After 8 years of practicing law elsewhere, Bob formed a partnership on a handshake with Lee Corman, following in the footsteps of the Corman brothers 50 years earlier. Bob's 55 years at KJK saw exponential growth and marked yet another achievement in his long and storied life. Second part of Hillel's maxim, if I'm only for myself, what am I? It was Bob's penchant to share the knowledge he gained that captures the essence of Hillel's words here. Even at the law firm, Bob offered his own found treasures across the world to establish the KJK art collection, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. Bob helped establish rare book exhibitions around the country, including the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco, the Whitney in New York City, and the Rofant Club here in Cleveland. His community involvement was vast, serving on boards and committees to the Cleveland Museum of Art, Western Reserve Historical Society, Contemporary Art Society, and the Fellowship of American Bibliophilic Societies. Importantly, Bob liked being a mentor. Make no mistake, he did not offer his counsel and wisdom to just anyone. He was discerning as to whom he wished to engage and if he believed a relationship would be beneficial all around. Once he took interest in you, he was deeply invested. Truth be told, he mentored those who he believed could hear feedback that wasn't always what they wanted to hear. He was generous with some who needed his help in a discreet way, knowing when confidence needed to be kept. At KJK, Bob was regarded with respect for his longevity and contributions to the law firm's culture and life. Sarah Gibbonet, senior counsel at KJK, said, Bob was ahead of his time in a number of ways. He was one of the first lawyers in Cleveland. He would have said he was the first to hire women lawyers. And he created a unique atmosphere when he banned the hanging of diplomas in KJK's offices. He really believed in the talents of his lawyers without the need to show off where one had attended law school. Kevin O'Connor, another law partner to Bob, spoke about his worldliness. The one word that comes to mind when I think of Bob Jackson is eclectic, from his collection of rare first edition books to his travels to Aboriginal New Guinea. He was as comfortable giving a talk in San Francisco on the writer William Burroughs and the Beats as he was in his beloved Rose Garden. Finally, KJK partner Alan Rouse shared, if anyone ever deserved to be described as a unique individual, it was Bob Jackson. When I joined KJK in 1985, I knew that Bob was a smart and successful lawyer. Only later did I learn that he was a Renaissance man. The breadth of his knowledge and interests and expertise was astounding. Bob taught me a lot about the business of being a lawyer, and I am grateful for his mentoring. But the most notable thing about Bob, in my view, was his unbounded love for Donna, Douglas, and Karen, and their families. Family meant everything to him. Rest in peace, Bob. We will never forget you. And that leads us to the final third of Hillel's maxim, and if not now, when? Bob's life was an exercise in getting as much out of the world as possible. He sought to fill his moments up with knowledge and growth. The same applied to his longtime partnership with our dear Donna. They met at Heights High, where Bob was eventually inducted into the Hall of Fame. But their courtship started when the two were in undergrad at different schools. Through written correspondence, what we now call snail mail, they initially connected and instantly hit it off. Donna could keep up with Bob's intellect and was not intimidated by him. Still, Bob may have been caught off guard by such a woman of beauty and substance. Curiously, in terms that some would use today, Bob ghosted Donna. He was not to be heard from. Not long after, though, Bob realized the error of his ways and may have simply panicked at getting too close too soon. To win her back, he took a circuitous route by taking courses in Donna's own college concentration at his school, speech pathology. His reasoning? He would learn as much about the discipline, and that would give him a rationale to strike up a conversation with her. It worked. Moreover, he sought to ingratiate himself to Donna's mother so she would like him enough to persuade Donna to consider him as an appropriate suitor. That worked too. And once back together, they were inseparable. Donna remembers their conversations going on until the late hours in the night. She found him interesting. They discussed philosophy, life, everything. Later in the marriage, they continued to share interests, and Donna was his editor, and sometimes even his co-author. Knowing he had found someone very special, Bob asserted an all-or-nothing proposal. By Thanksgiving, you and I will be engaged, or I won't see you anymore. Not long after, he proclaimed to Donna what has now become a well-repeated phrase in the family: "Marry me, and I will show you the world." Donna assented, and of course, reflected on that moment and said, "Rabbi, he really did show me the world." They were a team, though, and Doug, without hesitation, noted that his mother made Dad a better and more refined person. 65 years later, they seized every moment they could. They raised two wonderful children, Karen and Doug, and eventually welcomed Bob and Lynn into the family. Bob wished to raise thinking and discerning children. Just as he lived, he hoped to expose them to ideas and practices, even taking them to different houses of worship so they got a sense of what faith meant in other religions. He wished to expose Karen and Doug to the cultural arts with hopes that they'd find an appreciation for the world open to them. And while Bob traveled extensively for work, he made it a priority to come home earlier than he needed to be home with family. And of course, he became a grandfather and cherished that role with Alex and Katie, Alyssa, and Kenzie, loving them so much. Someone who was not so engaged with religion understood how it was important. If it was important to his children, to his grandchildren, he was supportive with Donna. I'm lucky to say that I've known Alyssa and Bob and Karen for practically 2 decades. And I officiated at Alyssa's bat mitzvah, and we saw how Alyssa took to her faith, and then Kenzie following suit during those COVID days when we just had services on Zoom. Kenzie always popping her head up, showing up, wishing everybody on the Zoom a Shabbat Shalom. Yes, he loved his family, and he loved what they loved. Bob's love of classical music and opera launched his support of the arts through the Ohio Chamber Orchestra, the Cleveland Chamber Music Society, Apollo's Fire, the Cleveland Institute of Music, Chamber Fest, Piano Fest. Always learning and always growing, Bob rarely was without reading material on his person. Even as the Parkinson's challenged his ability to function as he would have liked, he continued pushing on. If someone asked about it, he would say, "I'm managing." Indeed, Doug asserted that his dad was a fighter, and Donna noted that Bob, in fact, was a boxer in the Junior Golden Gloves back in the day. And while he did not engage for the rest of his life in physical fighting, he was a pugilist of ideas and words. Like it or not, Bob would test you to see what you were made of. Sparring of the intellect was his sport. And on Friday before the Sabbath came in, I had the honor of meeting Karen, Doug, and Donna on Lyman in Shaker. I was given a small tour of the first floor and the many pieces of artwork dotting their living areas. The home is lived in, and I could see how Bob and Donna added new pieces of art to an already richly decorated home. I tried to take in the many volumes of books that belonged to Bob, volumes of philosophy and how faith traditions, both radical and peaceful, took hold in countries most of us will never visit. I saw well-worn rare books and the most stunning figurines and furniture. Finally, I walked to the area where Bob read, where he thought, and where he wrote. I could imagine that he drew inspiration from the many art pieces surrounding him, from the backyard where he grew roses, from the windows leading out into that big world, the one he used to dream of as a boy. He realized that vision, showed himself and Donna a world filled with people and ideas, a world conquered by Bob Jackson. Most recently, Bob struggled with many physical ailments, as has been mentioned, but the fighter was always pushing to go another round. He lived a life following the advice of Hillel. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And darn it, if not now, when? May we all live a life as full as Bob lived his, a life of feeding our individual souls, of self-realization, of giving back to others, imparting our knowledge and our wisdom, and to seize the day knowing that tomorrow is simply an idea, but today is where we stand. Zichrono livracha. May Bob's memory be an enduring blessing. And let us say, Amen. Let us pause for a moment as we consider the gifts that Bob gave each of us in this world, near and far. We invite you to rise now as you are able for El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Chamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utohorim Kezoar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Hillel ben Hirsch, She'alach L'olamo, Ba'al Rachamim Hastirehu Beseter Kanafav L'olamim, V'yitzror b'yitzror HaChayim et Nishmato, Adonai hu Nachalato, V'yanuach b'shalom al Mishkavo, V'nomar. Amen. May the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion, our eyes to wisdom, that we might glimpse in perfect peace and sadness the way of all things. May Bob's memory be for us a blessing, and may we never let the light of his love grow dim in our hearts. May we remember his worthy and righteous deeds, that his memory be forever bound up in the bond of life. God is our source and our redemption, our beginning and our end. May Bob's death awaken us to this truth, that the bond of love we shared and we share, never be severed in sorrow. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. As we turn to the conclusion of our service, we once again share our condolences and love for Donna, for Karen and Bob and Douglas and Lynn, for Alyssa, Leilani, Sophia, Kenzie, Katie and Alex, and of course, he couldn't be here today in Vancouver, but his brother Michael and Alice, who survive him. Following services here, we will move to Lakeview Cemetery for the burial, and then following the burial, there will be visitation immediately at the home of Donna at 10 Lyman Circle in Shaker Heights, today till 8 p.m., and from 1 to 4 and 6 to 9, both Monday and Tuesday. Again, today until 8 p.m., and then 1 to 4 and 6 to 9, tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday. If you wish, you may make contributions in memory of Robert, suggested to In Motion or to the Robert H. and Donna L. Jackson Endowment for Special Collections at the Kelvin Smith Library of Case Western Reserve University.